This is CX of M Radio, the voice of customer experience professionals.
Welcome to the Delighted Customers Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Slayton, and I'm so glad you're here. I empower leaders to turn indifferent customers into loyal fans. I talk to guests with a wide range of expertise who share meaningful insights and wisdom. We give you practical tips and proven frameworks and share ways to help you delight your customers. Bill Staikos is a futurist. When I first met him in Washington, D.C. in the fall of 2022, he was presenting the state of customer experience in the year 2030. He is also a respected thought leader. He's worked at Freddie Mac. He's worked at where he was the head of the creation, execution, and measurement of the customer experience strategy across Freddie Mac's $2.3 trillion single-family guaranteed portfolio. And prior to that, he was the head of customer experience at Chase's home lending business, and he held senior-level global positions with Credit Suisse Group and with American Express. In today's episode, we talk about some really pressing and critical topics for companies seeking to differentiate themselves from the competition based on the customer experience, including embedding empathy into your organization, democratizing data across your enterprise, rethinking the ROI of CX, how a marketing miss became a CX issue, and 3 keys that companies should do now to plan for the future. All right. Well, I am so excited to introduce my guest on today's episode of the Delighted Customers Podcast, Bill Staikos. Bill, welcome to the show.
Mark, it's great to be here with you today. I really appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. If you don't mind, I'd like to, everybody comes to CX through a different path, through a different journey.
Yeah.
And I would really be interested in how it started for you and how it evolved to where it is today. How'd you end up where you are?
Yeah. So if you give me a minute, just because it goes way back. So I always joke around. It's not really a joke. It's actually a true story, but I joke around that my CX experience started when I was about 6 years old.
Nice.
And, I've got Greek immigrant parents, and I'm from the Northeast, New York native. And, the cliche, if you're Greek, you either own a diner or you work in a diner. And back in those years, at least, I'm not sure if it's still the case today, largely is. But I grew up in working in a diner, looked at my mother, being a hostess, greeting customers, making sure that the food was fine, they were having a good experience. My dad working in the kitchen, which I now to this day equate back office and front office. Worked in diners in pretty much every role. And my parents were always just very adamant I wouldn't ever work in a diner, classic immigrant kind of story, go be a doctor, lawyer, something else, right? Than what we do here, or banker. And I went into financial services. And I read Joe Pine's book in 1999. I'm going to date myself a little bit. It was post-college. And that book connected what I grew up in, that service mindset that was instilled in me as a kid, to something that's real and like a real job. And I quit financial services after reading that book. And I'm like, this is like a real thing. I want to go do this. And like they say, the rest is history. I went and worked for like a small market research company. And I was having so much fun. We were doing research for Microsoft, HP, Compaq about how to penetrate into the small and mid-market business space. I did the conjoint analysis on the first Palm Pilot. If I'm really going to date myself, which helped price the first Palm Pilot, which is pretty cool. Pretty cool project. And went into some consulting for a long while there, and then just decided I want to be on the client side, and have worked in CX teams, have led them, have built new practices, have brought EX and CX together with culture. So it's really varied. And now I work at Medallia. I'm a senior vice president at the company. Medallia, for your listeners that don't know what it is the #1 enterprise experience platform. So not just surveys, but also bringing disparate signals together to understand what your customer needs are, and then helping you make heads or tails of them, and then being able to take action on those insights. And I also podcast about, as you know, about customer and employee experience. And I've been doing the podcast now for a couple of years. So that's me.
Thank you, Bill. That was a great run up. And if I could just, for our audience, Medallia. So what market would you say is kind of their niche?
So, well, our biggest vertical is financial services.
Okay.
My customer and employee experience work spans plus 20 years in financial services. So I work with a lot of, large, mid-size financial services businesses, companies. But we do serve every industry vertical. And, not only large enterprises, but also mid-market companies as well. We've got different solutions that meet the needs of different size organizations. So,
okay. And implicit in there is a platform.
That's right.
That you guys offer as a piece of a software system to help gather and collect customer data and then turn that into insights.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Just want to give people a little background.
Yeah.
So Bill and I, we don't live geographically too far away. I'm in Delaware, he's in Virginia, but we hadn't met in person until a couple of weeks ago. Then we met twice in two different states.
I know. That was so cool. That was really, really cool.
We were both in DC and then in Michigan at Michigan State University, presenting. And the presentation that Bill gave. So Bill, I of all the people that I know in the CX world, you're probably one of the handful that I would call a futurist.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
And your presentation in DC was about what it's going to look like in the year 2030.
Yeah.
And I don't want to ruin anything for the audience today, but we're not going to be spending time in 2030. What we're going to talk about is a little bit more in line with more today, and what CEOs and business leaders might be curious about in terms of, hey, what is this thing called customer experience? Why would I want to have it in my organization? And what's it going to do for me? Like, what results can I expect? And that was more in line with your presentation at Michigan State.
Yeah. Yeah. I think today, Mark, there's a really big misconception with CX's surveys. Customer satisfaction score, net promoter score, or NPS. Folks, your listeners may have heard of that stuff. And it really is so much more than that. When I'm talking to executives or even other CX leaders, I always say the primary objective, and this is in my presentation that I gave at Michigan State. You should have three primary goals from a customer experience perspective, or even employee experience perspective for that matter. Number one is you increase revenues, you drive efficiencies or cut costs or lower costs to serve for your business, and you improve the culture in your organization. Like, if your goal as a customer experience leader, or if you're a CEO and you're saying, hey, I want someone to measure the satisfaction of our customer base, and I want that person to own that score and increase it, you're thinking about it the wrong way. And unfortunately, the customer experience as a discipline, or experience as a discipline, has fallen into this, what I call the survey break fix trap. Meaning, I send out a survey to a customer, they give me feedback. That feedback could be negative. I go fix that as a company, and then I just wait for the next, or just see what the next survey says. If I'm lucky, a lot of surveys say they'll go fix the same thing, right? And let's say if you're really lucky, that's 12 to 15% response rate of your customers responding to our survey. And then what about the other 85%? What are they saying or doing? And, there's a lot of great and, not expensive capabilities out there today, technology that helps you understand and make sense of different signals, meaning, what are your customers doing in-app or online? What is their digital behavior? And you can determine whether they're happy or not, frankly, by that digital behavior. And you don't have to ask them one question. You can easily transcribe, if you've got a contact center, you can transcribe those calls into text and have that text analyzed for sentiment and themes, as an example. And there's gold in there. right? I mean, the largest banks probably get about 1.5 million calls per day into their contact center. Obviously, not everybody has that kind of volume, but over time, you can build up that database of knowledge, and you can identify what are we doing well and what do we need to improve, and then how do we double down on what we're doing well to really differentiate us in the marketplace, and create more share of wallet or revenue, whatever you want to call it. And then for the things that we're not doing so well, and how do we fix those? Like, what are our customers? What are their expectations of us for this specific problem? And I think that too much folks are focused on the survey, and that's how they're doing. And then when scores go down or markets get tough, I mean, you're seeing people get laid off left and right. It's because CX isn't nice to have. A friend of mine said this, and she said that I can use this term, but CX is like sprinkles on ice cream to a lot of executives or the CX team, and it shouldn't be that. It should really be a driver for business strategy and growth in an organization.
So that's a great point. Let's build off that topic. Yeah. So if I'm a CEO and I'm thinking of it as sprinkles on ice cream, like why should I think about it differently?
Well, I think that I think that if you're a CEO of a business, or let's just say in the C-suite, you're constantly thinking about how to improve your organization and maximizing the output of every team. And if the output of a team is a report that goes to an executive group or some part of the business that shows a score or a metric going up or down and not much else, that's not a whole lot of value add, right? They
Right.
might be saying, going back to one part of the business, let's say you work for a bank and let's say you're an insurance company. Hey, customers are saying that they're less satisfied with claims, and maybe that's due to the length of time from the initial call to payment on that claim. Okay. That's still useless information. It really is. Like, if you're a business, if you're an operator, okay, well, what is the expectation? Like, do they expect it to be 14 days, 7 days, 1 day, 24-hour turnaround? Like, you got to go deeper. And a lot of teams don't go deeper. And if it is, let's say the expectation is, hey, this should be 24 hours. Okay, can we even do that? Like, operationally, can we even, like, how would we do that? Could we do that? How close could we even get to where it's still profitable for us to have that person take a call, go through the claim process, the adjuster, et cetera, and then make the payout? And, without someone constantly looking at, how do I move the dial constantly on sort of the journeys that our customers go through to improve them? If you're not looking at or going deeper on that feedback to say, this is exactly what we need to do for our customers to continue to come back and paying those premiums to us versus switching. And you can't do that through surveys alone. It's not possible. You can't get deep enough.
So you can't get deep enough. Let's talk about, I know you're an advocate of core competencies for a CX journey, a CX discipline.
Yeah.
Talk about what some of those competencies are, if I'm a CEO, that I need to embed into my culture.
Yeah. So one, and I know this sounds a little bit like sprinkles on ice cream, but you gotta have like empathy for your customer embedded in the organization. And that, call it, being able to walk a mile in their shoes, whatever you want to call it. But, and you can't, if you're not listening to what your customers are doing and saying, meaning through direct feedback or, direct observation, it's tough to have empathy for the customer. Number two is, to have empathy for the customer throughout your organization, you need to democratize those insights. And what I mean by that is, every operator should have access to that information. And whether it's a product team, whether it's an agile team, whether it's a marketing team, whether it's sales organization, they need to have that information in as real time as possible. Otherwise, they can't make the decisions they need to make to improve products or services, to be able to sell better, to create more sort of growth in a relationship, or be able to save a relationship from churning, right? A lot of companies that I talk to, don't even like send their sales teams, hey, this customer gave us a low score, right? Or this customer gave us an NPS, like they would recommend us. Go ask for the recommendation. Very, very simple things like that you can do within a survey context, that companies are not doing. And, that leads to churn, and that leads to, missed opportunities from a growth perspective.
So we're empathizing, we're listening, we're gathering insights,
Yeah.
we're going deeper than companies normally or typically might go, and then we're democratizing the data. So now we've got to that point. What's next? What else do we need to do then?
Yeah, I think it's empowering or giving your team members, your frontline staff, the runway or the leeway to be able to act on that information. And if you're not empowering your business to act on the insights that you're gathering around your customers, you're missing a big opportunity. And whether that's, and I've heard this right in my own career, in places that I've worked, giving a sales leader information about a client. Okay, well, how does this help me? Like, how am I going to drive sales through this? Like, they're just unhappy. I don't want to call them. Right. So like being able to coach and train and give people the tools to be able to act on insights I think is another big marker of what organizations should be looking to do. And finally, I think that, the last thing I would say about this is think about your organization horizontally as your customers engage, right? So if you think about sort of financial services organizations, and let's just take a big company. They may have a card business, they may have an auto business, a mortgage business, a retail business, maybe even an insurance arm, right? And what you find a lot is that you have a leader on top of every one of these silos. They have their own objectives for their products. And the reality is a lot of customers actually buy more than one product. So you might have a retail account and a credit card and maybe a mortgage or an auto loan with a specific financial institution. But, the people in that business that are working for the company can't see that. That's a major issue. And because they can't see that, they can't personalize the experiences when they call in. Or they can't say, well, gosh, this is a really important client, because maybe they've even got private wealth, with that business, right? I really need to pay attention to this. I need to maybe treat them with a little bit higher level of service. I might, put the white gloves on for this call, right? And if you're not thinking horizontally across your business as your customers interact with you, you're missing opportunities to connect experiences for them and to design your products in a way that it doesn't feel like a customer is jumping from one company to the next, depending on the product that they're dealing with.
So you're missing opportunities if the customer is feeling like they're operating within a set of walls. And so why does that happen? Why does that even exist?
I think it's just, one, you've got legacy technology that doesn't talk to each other. You've got sort of the individual silo objectives, right? Like individual strategies, data that doesn't talk well to each other, right? There are a number of reasons why that happens. I just think that financial services in particular really should be investing more in, again, thinking about, as a consumer, where do I hop in and hop out and engage that brand? And what are their opportunities? I'll give you another example. In a past life, we would look at data like single product customers versus multi-product customers, and we would try and identify the single product customers that are most likely or that look like multi-product customers, but they don't have multiple products. That could be demographics, socioeconomics, et cetera. That creates massive marketing opportunity. And think about marketing in a smarter way versus just sending out a card flyer. credit card flyer or some other marketing that, you kind of spray and pray. And I see that a lot from credit card companies today. I've got one credit card. It's our only credit card that we use. We have others, obviously. But every week, my wife and I get a mailer for the same credit card. And I'm just like, they're burning through tens of millions of dollars because I'm sure that I'm not the only one that this is happening to. That's a CX issue or a customer experience issue, right? One, it doesn't put a lot of faith in, I don't have really a lot of faith in sort of the marketing machine of this organization. I've used to work for them actually. But number two, like if they thought about sort of me as an individual or us as a household, which I know they've got all that data, they can be much smarter about and targeted with the products and services that they approach us with.
So they can be more strategic.
Yeah, of course. Saves them money, lowers their marketing spend, improves the likelihood of me taking up another one of their products. Because I think the card product is great. It's literally the only one we use. And, create stickiness in the relationship versus, hey, this is really the only one I use. What if I just started using a different one today? Right. Just takes that little crack in the relationship to start people thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't, put all my eggs in one basket.
So, Bill, we talked about ways to improve the experience from a strategy standpoint. We talked about being empathetic, listening, democratizing the data, allowing the frontline staff some latitude to be able to make adjustments, and then organizing horizontally rather than in these vertical silos. If I'm a CEO, again, let's just say it's a mid-size organization, I'm going to be asking or be asked about what is the financial impact or value of CX work in general. That could be, maybe we're thinking about hiring a CX professional. Maybe we have one and we're wondering what is the return on it. It's not, we're just seeing reporting. How would you go about proving the ROI, and and what framework would you start to think about that?
So here's another thing that I think where I'm a little bit different than your average CX person.
Okay.
I think that CX as a discipline is having the wrong conversation around, let's prove the ROI of CX. No other organization that I've worked for talks about proving their ROI. I don't know why the CX community has gotten into this thing where they got to prove the ROI. I think it's just a dumb conversation, to be honest. If I'm a CEO and I hire an executive and they have like a real toolkit around customer experience, and I give them the resources they need to be successful. So being able to capture the voice of the customer, not again, surveys, but also like what they're doing. So being able to look at digital behavior, being able to analyze operational data alongside, multiple signals, being able to translate that voice to text and analyze that. That's not a huge cost or investment. But I expect that person to be able to tell me, much like I would turn to my CFO or my CMO or CIO, how are you going to use your skill set, the tools that you have access to help our company drive revenue? Let's say your strategy or one of your objectives is grow revenue by 10%. I want that head of CX to help me understand how they're going to use their toolkit to create experiences that drive revenue 10%. Like I don't care about customer satisfaction. Well, I do care about customer satisfaction scores, right? But like at the end of the day, you got to have that person focused and drive real business outcomes. And unless you have in your strategy, improve NPS by 10 points, which I've never worked for one company that does that. That CX leader needs to rethink their approach and how they're leveraging the toolkit to be successful and say, my goal is to drive company revenue by 10%, or maybe it's reduce the cost to serve and reduce our costs overall. I'll give you a great example. I was speaking to a large insurance company, and the head of their life insurance business said, because I asked them, well, what are some of your strategic goals in the coming year? And they said, well, I've got a plus 10% bogey on my 2023 revenue targets, was just given that. So that's a big number. And I've got $100 million efficiency play that I've got to solve for. And I was like, wow, that's actually pretty aggressive. And this person said, yeah, it was really aggressive. And I said, well, how are you using your CX team to help solve for some of that? And they kind of looked at me literally like I had three heads. And like, well, that's not what we're saying. So I'm like, well, okay. I'm like, but why don't you give them 30 million out of the 100 million on efficiency as their target? And this person again looks at me like I have three heads. And like, that's not what they do. They don't have the resources to do that. I'm like, actually, I know what your CX team is capable of doing. I absolutely think that they can hit that plus. You just got to give them the target. And I don't know if they did. My sense is that they gave them something. But that to me is the conversation to be having between a business owner or leader and your CX discipline. And if they can't help you achieve that, then you've got the wrong team.
So let's walk through an illustration of how I might, if I'm how that might work for a CEO, like in his or her mind, like how that might work. So whether it's an operational cost savings or improvement, or whether it's revenue growth, there are different. You alluded to the fact that there are some operational costs. There are some you mentioned some experience data or metrics, and then there's other top line metrics as well. To talk to me, like, it doesn't have to be specific numbers, but how might you walk through that getting there?
Yeah. So I would probably start to look at why customers are calling into a contact center. Easy, low-hanging fruit kind of example. And where they're calling from. Like what were they doing before they call the contact center? Because it's one thing for an agent to say, this customer is called about payments, level one, and specifically couldn't execute a payment like online, let's just say. Okay. So, we hope that's correct, right? My experience, and I'm not saying contact center agents are bad people. It's just they're getting a lot of calls each day. They probably have 200 different category and subcategory combinations to actually pick which ones. A lot of them are just picking other, so you don't really have great data. So I think it's really understanding, one, what are people doing? So what is the journey? So let's think about the payments journey for your customers. And maybe they want to align, okay, what data can we discern around payments? What are they doing? Are, based on sort of, are they rage clicking? Are they creating sort of like the bird's nest scrolling? Are they going back and forth, different sort of options? Do we have anything confusing? I won't mention the bank, but my bank, if I want to deposit a check, would take a picture of a check. I don't go to deposits. I have to go to payments. Right. So like the UX or usability, user experience is not very intuitive.
No.
Right. Now I'm used to this because I selected every other option until I got to, payments. And then it was like, make a deposit. I'm like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. Right. But okay, that's where it is.
Right.
So really trying to figure out what are customers doing and not doing, and where that friction point is. You might have a purchasing journey and customers might be falling out. So being able to understand where in that digital experience they're falling out, you've got revenue leakage. So how do we fix that part of the journey to keep customers in the funnel and get them to click buy in the shopping cart, right?
Right.
If they're calling the contact center and you understand why and where they're coming from in that context, then you can fix that. You not only sort of let customers then execute on the payment, which you get paid for, but also you reduce the calls into the contact center, which is probably, let's say, $7 a call. If you got 1 million calls on one topic, that's $7 million that you've just saved your business, right? You probably say, okay, if we reduce calls by 1 million calls, maybe we don't need 100 people. Maybe we need 95. And then you repurpose those 5 to do something different in the organization. So there's a lot of kind of, connecting the dots, but you got to collect the dots first and look for those opportunities to say, okay, we plugged a revenue leak here because we know where in the digital experience customers are falling out of the funnel. And we know that because of that friction, they're calling into the contact center Now we've reduced both, we've reduced our cost and we've increased our revenue, right? Because they're staying in the funnel. Another great example might be, let's take surveys. If your company, let's just say, just does a survey, I mentioned it before in the podcast. If customers are giving you a 10 out of 10 or a 5 out of 5 or a very high NPS score, meaning that they would recommend your business, don't just celebrate that. Call back your customer and say, thanks so much for the high rating. Is there anyone that you would recommend? Ask for their recommendation. If they say they're likely to recommend to a friend or a colleague, then ask for it. If you converted 1%, right, even, that's more revenue for your company. So different things that you can do that don't really cost much, frankly, that can really drive top or bottom line growth for your organization.
Yeah, those are great examples. So I heard you say, at some point you have to look at the operations, and where a customer is experiencing friction, and in this case, maybe channel jumping because there's too much friction in one channel. They jump to a more expensive channel.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's a lose-lose, right?
That's right. It's 100%, right? The customer is frustrated. As a business, you're frustrated because you're losing customers. And, it's costing you money in the whole process, which is even worse, right? Like, you don't want to be losing customers and having you cost more at the end of the day. It's kind of a double whammy to your business.
So where does redesigning the experience, taking a look at where the friction is, maybe it's a journey map, maybe it's some other way, but where does that fit into the whole picture?
So look, you can create journey maps if you want. My advice has always been two things. One is look at what products or services you have that are making your business the most money, and start there, because my experience has always been that's where the most revenue leakage is as well. And I mean, just by sheer volume and by way of, being the highest volume part of the business. Right. And if you can think about, you don't have to, personally, like, yes, you can create a journey map. You can understand from the customer's perspective what's happening. You can create a service blueprint and map out, meaning you can map out the back of the house and sort of the, what customers don't see versus what customers do see. You can spend a lot of money doing that. But you can also do this relatively inexpensively, meaning let's understand the process from our business's perspective first. Let's understand, then let's lay over what are our customers saying, and where we have information gaps, let's just go ask our customers, and you don't need 1,000 surveys. I mean, go ask 20 customers. You'll probably get more in those 20 from a pure usability perspective than, the kind of curve it's diminishing returns for usability after about, frankly, like 12 or 13 conversations. But let's just say you've got 20 people and you ask them about their experience and what's challenging. And you try and pick a diverse set, right? You don't want to just go all to like a Gen Z or, Gen X like me or you, or, baby boomers, and understand like where their friction points are. Be smart about who you're asking. And then, sit down as a company and say, okay, how can we design this better? That's profitable for us, but also balances the customer's needs, right? You don't have to wow the customer, and create a lot of cost for your company. I think that's just not a good business practice. I think just create a good experience that is consistently good, and that you can deliver in a profitable way.
Yeah, I started to smile a little bit because you included me, I think, in the Gen Xers, and I somehow escaped into the baby boomer. Just made that cutoff.
Oh, so you did? Oh, man.
Appreciate the compliment.
Hey, no, that's kudos to you then for looking younger than I do even.
So thank you for that. So looking, if I were a CEO and Bill pulled out his crystal ball, 3 years from now.
Yeah.
And you were going to share some advice. What are the common pitfalls that companies fall into, and what's like the number 1 or 2 things that they should start doing now?
Yeah. Invest in your data. in a big, making sure that no matter what the source is, either you've centralized it, one, but also you know what data you have, how it can be used, and you have it in a form that is usable. And you want that from an analytics perspective. And it's operational data, it's financial data, it's different customer data. Get your data ducks in a row. That's always my first sort of rule. And I really like, if you think about sort of experience, the customer experience work generally, where the work is going is data and automation. So how do I leverage, again, I don't love surveys. They have a place. They'll always have a place, likely for a long, long time. But think about that. And then think about what technology, number two is, I'd say, think about what technologies could disrupt your organization or change the way that you engage with your customers. I talk a lot about the future of our discipline and the advent of new technology like wearables as an example. If you're a financial services CEO, wearables are going to fundamentally change your business, whether you realize it or not. In fact, if once a client walks into your office with a wearable, that experience is now digital. And that can create a lot of new and interesting data for your company. We got to figure out like how people will share that data and what's shareable, what's not, obviously, but that is really important data. So even that, how are we going to think about new data and how are we going to use that to not only coach and train RFAs, right? If you've got financial advisors working in your company or claim adjusters or, whatever that might be. So one, getting your data set now or getting in a great place now will help you be in a very, very great place once wearables become a little bit more ubiquitous, and everyone's kind of walking around with visors over their head at some point over the next, let's say, 7 years. Number two is investing in technology that helps you not only connect disparate sources, but also understand the experience that your customers are having through whatever touch point they're engaging with you and your brand is super important. I think experience can be a massive differentiator for an organization, not only for the reasons that we just talked about, but also, and I think it's pretty well known, right? If you deliver a great customer experience, you can charge more, right? You get more business, et cetera. So being able to invest in capabilities, and I don't mean this to sound self-serving, but investing in capabilities to help you understand the experience being delivered, I think is really, really critical. And then finally, investing in sort of, that middleware or APIs, making sure that technology, whatever you're investing in, can talk to other systems in a smart way. One, it reduces your IT risk. Two, it improves your opportunities to be able to act on information. And three, I think it'll reduce your overall cost of ownership too.
And obviously the flip side of that then would be the mistakes would be not doing those things.
Oh yeah. I mean, the data piece for me is number one. If you're not investing in your data in a smart way, customer data platforms have been really popular over the last couple of years. I think more investment needs to be made there by a lot of organizations, big and small. And I think that there's millions being left on the table, frankly, an opportunity by not investing and getting your data in order.
So for the average layperson, when you say customer data systems, I mean, I think about everything from Medallia to Salesforce. What is there a specific category of data, customer data platforms that you're thinking of?
I mean, Salesforce is pretty popular from a broader CRM perspective.
Yeah.
Organizations like Adobe really can help marketing as well as experience organizations. We can help. Medallia certainly can help from an experience perspective. So, customer data platforms, or CDPs, is sort of like the acronym. I think organizations should be looking at those to say, how are we bringing all this disparate data together, into a central location that allows us to use it in a much smarter way than we have in the past. And that's not just technology, that's also people. Like, you got to invest also in data architects, data scientists to be able to make heads or tails of this stuff. Right. The people element is obviously there, and that's also can be expensive. So sometimes even more expensive than the software itself.
Well, that is those are some interesting tips and good stuff. And it only makes sense that having the right, so we don't want to have a technology in search of a strategy.
Totally.
Right,
technology is never the answer. It's always the question.
It's always the question. And on that note, we'll end a great conversation with Bill. Thank you so much. This has been really insightful and different than any of my other podcasts. I love your insight. Just a crazy background. I love the story about working in the Greek restaurant with the family. I grew up on Long Island, so every corner we had a Greek restaurant, a Greek diner.
Yeah.
And one was better than the next. And we spent Saturday nights. And what I loved was that it seemed like they never closed. They were open all the time.
Yeah, you get breakfast at all hours too, which is always a nice bonus.
That's exactly right. And on a high school student's budget, that worked great.
Yeah.
So, Bill, you are an awesome guy, CX thought leader, industry leader, and just so honored that you would be on my Delighted Customers podcast show. Thank you. Also wanted to ask if anyone wanted to reach you, what would be the best way they can get a hold of you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Bill Staikos, Staikos. Hit me up on LinkedIn if you want to chat. Happy to continue a conversation. If you have any questions or want to noodle any ideas, just DM me, direct message me through LinkedIn. I think that's probably the easiest way.
And also, you have an award-winning podcast, right? Share the name of it.
I do. So the show's called Be Customer Led, Be Customer LED led. It's on every major podcasting platform as well as YouTube. We do audio and video, and we just crossed 100 listeners in 106 countries, which is pretty cool.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's impressive. Bill, thank you so much for being on the show.
It's my pleasure, Mark. And it was awesome to get to meet you within days of each other, those meetings in 2 different states. I can't say that a lot about people that I interact with. But I'm honored that you had me on the show. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Bill.
Thanks for listening to the Delighted Customers podcast. I want to ask you if you would do 2 things. One is, if you've enjoyed this episode or any of my other ones, hit subscribe or follow. I've got a lot of other great guests that are coming up on the show and a lot of other great content, and I don't want you to miss anything. You can find any links or references on the show in the show notes, and you can find those on my website at empoweredcx.com. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining us for this session of CX of M Radio. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit cxofm.org for more resources.